Today, the Commission has decided to fine Google €1.49 billion for breaking EU antitrust rules. Google has engaged in illegal practices when it comes to their search advertising brokering in order to cement its dominant market position. This is the third antitrust fine that we have imposed on Google. In June 2017, we fined Google for its illegal behaviour in comparison shopping services. And in July 2018, we fined Google for its illegal behaviour relating to the Android mobile operating system for mobile apps and services. I'd like to address what Google has been doing to comply with those two earlier decisions. But before I do that, just let me give you a few more details on the decision that we took today. As you know, when you type in a query into Google's search engine, you not only get the results, but you also get ads that are based on the words that you typed in. In fact, that sort of advertising is by far Google's main source of revenue. Google sells advertising on its own search page. But Google also has a business of brokering advertising space on other websites. That could include websites like newspapers or blogs or travel sites. They will all include a search box. That's the point. And having search on your site, that allows the owners of those websites to make money in much the same way Google does on its own sites by selling the space to search results. These other websites, well, they rely on an advertising broker. And Google is by far the biggest of those brokers with its platform AdSense for search. And this market is an important market because it's an entry point for competitors, including other search providers, for online advertising platforms. By gaining a foothold in advertising brokering, well, then they can grow their business, or they could grow their business, and try to challenge Google in the general search advertising. Google is dominant when it comes to online advertising brokering market, with market shares in Europe well above 70% since 2006. And there are high barriers to entry, which makes it very hard for competitors to come in. Despite that, competition should be possible in this market. Different websites can use different brokers, and the same website can actually use more than one broker to provide different ads. Indeed, our investigation showed that many websites had an interest to use more than one broker. Today's decision is about how Google abused its dominance to stop websites using brokers other than the AdSense platform. For the most important websites, which Google calls direct partners, Google provides brokering services through tailored agreements. Our investigation looked at more than 200 of those agreements, and they contained all at least one type of restrictions that harm competition. These different types of restrictions, they often overlapped in time. The first type is an exclusivity provision, which Google began to include in its contracts from 2006. It meant that the most commercially important direct partners were prevented from sourcing search ads from Google's rivals on any of their websites. The second type is called premium placement. Google began including it in its contract from 2009 to replace over time the existing explicit exclusivity provisions. These clauses, they didn't completely stop direct partners sourcing ads from Google's rivals. But they meant that direct partners would have to take a minimum of search ads from Google and put them in the most visible and most profitable parts of the page. So the best web page space, where users were most likely to click, was still reserved for Google. The third type of restriction even allowed Google to control how websites displayed search ads of Google's rivals. Under this clause, website owners, they would have to get the written approval from Google before changing the way they displayed search ads of Google's rivals, right down to the size, the color, and even the font of those ads. As in many digital markets, search advertising is a market with strong network effects. So the more users you have, the more valuable your services becomes to each and every one of them. That meant that to compete effectively, you need to build scale. These restrictive clauses, well, they led to a vicious circle. Google's rivals, they were unable to grow and to compete. And as a result of that, well, owners of websites had limited options for selling advertising space on those websites and were forced solely to rely on Google. And as a result from that, Google benefited from network effects and became even stronger. There was no reason for Google to include these restrictive clauses in their contracts, except to keep rivals out of the market. And this is why we concluded that between 2006 and 2016, Google's behavior was illegal under EU antitrust rules. It prevented its rivals from having a chance to innovate and to compete in the market on their merits. Advertisers and website owners, they have less choice and likely faced higher prices that would be passed on to consumers. The fine of 1.49 billion euros reflects the serious and the sustained nature of Google's infringement. And anyone, of course, who have suffered damage because of Google's behavior can also claim compensation from Google through national courts. Google removed these illegal restrictions from its contract in 2016, around the time when we issued the statement of objection. At a minimum, our decision requires Google to put a stop to those restrictions or any other restriction with an equivalent effect and not to reinstate them.